I am Anna Seewald, and this is Authentic Parenting, a podcast about personal development in the context of parenting, where I explore how you can find more calm, connection, and joy in parenting through the process of self-discovery and inner growth with a trauma-informed lens. Today's episode is a bit of an unusual one. The tables have turned. One of my longtime faithful listeners, Amber Sinem from Australia, who has become a dear friend, wanted to interview me. I have to admit it's a bit nerve-wracking when I get to interview it on my own podcast, but I agreed to do it anyway. She particularly wanted to know more about my own pregnancy, conception, early days of motherhood, and everything in between. Amber was a guest on the podcast recently. We did an on-air coaching call with her. It's episode 184, titled Disagreeing on Discipline, How You Can Find a Middle Ground in Parenting. The best part of podcasting for me has been the many wonderful relationships that I have developed with people from around the world. But unless you reach out, I wouldn't know how to connect with you. So if you have the urge, the desire to connect with me, you can always call me, leave a voicemail, send me an email, and I will definitely return your call and respond to you. I hope you'll enjoy this episode, and if you have questions, if you want to share your story, most definitely do not hesitate to get in touch.
So I thought that when I first came across your podcast was actually when I was breastfeeding, because as you know, you're kind of sitting there and you have sometimes an hour or so to sit and listen to podcasts. So that's where I came across your podcast. And I was recently thinking, my husband and I are going to start trying for a second. And it made me think about that early journey and all the emotions that are involved and the experience. And I was really curious to hear your story and hear about how you found the process, I guess, from the thinking about having a child to then the pregnancy through birth, and then that kind of early first couple of weeks and the first year, what that experience was like for you. I know it's every person's is quite different, but thinking about that journey again, I'd love to hear about your story. I've heard the stories a bit as your daughters got older, but I'd love to hear about the early part of your story. And I think sometimes, your listeners will refer to a friend, who's pregnant and is starting to learn a lot about getting pregnant and that process. And maybe this would be useful for them to be able to hear, in a way, someone who's gone on the journey and then reflections back, what they would have liked to have done differently. I'm curious to hear that contrast for what your expectations were and what the reality was for you.
Mm-hmm. How about if we take it step by step and you deconstruct and ask me the first question? This all sounds intimidating.
But no, not at all. But I guess one of the things, my intention a little bit is that there's a lot of mythology around getting pregnant and being pregnant and having birth. And then it kind of, I found for me personally that it didn't match up with what my actual experience was. And so it'd be interesting to get your contrast.
Yes. So as you know, my daughter is 11 years old and I have one child, an only child. And I often joke, but which is not true. I often say, oh, knowing what I know about parenting and motherhood, I only have one child, which is kind of a joke. But so thinking about a baby, as I remember what you asked, I was already established in my career, in my life. We conceived when she was born when I was 32, basically, right? So I was mature, hopefully, and ready to have a baby and wanted to have a baby. So she was a much desired baby. I was ready. I was planning. I was ready in my life to have a baby. I was also jealous of other people at that time already who had babies, to tell you the truth, because it seemed like when I wanted to have a baby, when I was ready psychologically, and you're never ready, let's face it. But when the desire,
very true.
right, when the desire was very alive, it felt as if everybody around me was getting pregnant very quickly, except me. And
Yes.
we did encounter challenges, to tell you the truth. Some parts of it I am not comfortable speaking, not because I want to hide from my audience, but because also it involves my partner, right?
Totally.
I don't have his consent, but it wasn't easy. It took us many, many months. We were even told we will never have a baby. And there were no explanation. We went
that's
through.
Terrible.
That's
very challenging.
Yes, we went through a lot of emotional parts, especially me. When you desire to have a baby, you have a plan, and you know what you want, and you dream as a woman. And it was very special and meaningful, and it wasn't happening. And the more you want, the more it doesn't happen. And I believe that if things meant to happen, they happen. We didn't do anything. We gave up. Eventually, we gave up. That's the honest truth. And once we gave up, I saw a dream. And in my dream, it evolved something around baby. And that morning when I woke up, we used to live in a high-rise building at the time on the 15th floor. And I saw a white dove that came to our balcony. We had a terrace. And I found it very odd. It was relevant to my dream, but I couldn't remember my dream. But then I saw this white dove and I connected my feelings, and something in me said, take a pregnancy test. It was August 19, I remember. I took a pregnancy test and it was positive. I took a picture of that dove with a camera that has a timestamp, not a digital camera, but one of those film cameras. And I do have the prints. And the funny thing is, when my daughter was born in April via C-section, I saw the dove again around her birth in April. And I'm not kidding. I do have the pictures with the timestamp. And I started believing in miracles, and
that's amazing. Beautiful story.
We couldn't believe it was truly, when we gave up hope, we were told we can never have children. We had a baby. And thankfully, she is a vibrant, happy, healthy child. And of course, we never wanted to have a second child. And we never even tried, or we didn't want to have a second child. I think we were just overjoyed in gratitude. So that's the basic story of that. The pregnancy went very well. I was really conscious of everything I was eating, putting into my body. I quit caffeine before getting pregnant, during pregnancy, after pregnancy, while breastfeeding. I was very conscious and mature of the things that I was doing, taking care of myself. Pregnancy went very smoothly. And, she was born a healthy child.
That's beautiful. That's a lovely story. I'm curious, when you talk about getting pregnant, like I felt that people around me never really talked about people. It was just assumed that you would get pregnant very quickly. And it was only when I was actually on that journey myself that people started to share their stories. Oh, yes, we took longer. And it's interesting, one of the things I think in society we don't feel that comfortable talking about is that, fertility is something that is not a given, and that can be a real challenge, I think, and isolating for, mums to be if that journey does work out.
Yes, and it impacts you. You want a child and it doesn't happen. And it just changes you so much psychologically. You become obsessed with that idea. I know of a friend currently going through that process, and it's just heartbreaking to witness that you tie so much around that. You put everything into this desire, and it can be consuming and very stressful, right?
Definitely. I definitely was surprised. We were quite lucky that it happened after a couple of months of trying. But I just came with this assumption that the first time we would try, I would get pregnant. And it was this realization, wow, we carry all these myths in our head about things about pregnancy and then birth. And I think that was kind of almost my introduction to the whole path of childhood, is that suddenly what you expect will not necessarily go as planned, and being comfortable with that, letting go of the control. And it sounds like, we share that we kind of were organized and we were at a place in our career and our life, and it's like, okay, I'm ready now, And then it's the kind of the first realization of many realizations on that, I think, the childhood journey, that no, your control is not necessarily going to result in exactly how you expected things to go as planned.
Yes. Speaking of control, I had this idea in my head from the very beginning that I was going to give birth to a boy, because I was thinking that I grew up without a mother, and I can never be a mom to a girl, and God will never give me a girl. Of course, I'm going to get a boy, and I know how to parent a boy. So that was my thinking, right? At whatever, and all along the first couple of months of pregnancy, I was feeding myself that idea that I was going to have a boy. And when we went to the sonogram, right, I don't know what month it is, like 5th month when they tell you the gender. When we were at that appointment, the technician looked at us and said, "Would you like to find out the gender of your baby?" And I said, "Yes, of course." And in my heart, I knew I'm going to hear, "You're going to have a boy." And she looked at us and said, "Congratulations, you're going to have a baby girl." And in that moment, I started crying hysterically. Speaking of control and preconceived ideas and letting go of your crazy hopes, and it shattered for me something inside of me. That was the first realization that it is not up to you, woman, I started crying, and my husband said, why are you crying? Of course, he didn't know my hopes and my fantasies, right? They were secretive. I didn't share with anyone. And I said, no, these are happy tears. I'm very happy. But of course, that was a lie. And I journaled later. I said, how can I be a mom to a girl? And I had lots of doubts around that. It was very difficult, to even imagine. But oh boy, I was wrong about that as well. And
that's wonderful. That it's so interesting, isn't it? And I'm curious, growing up in Armenia, do people talk about fertility and, that type of, people challenges, or is it kind of something that's, you keep that hidden, people don't share those stories?
I think it's universal. I think people who are older and they cannot conceive, they tend to keep it a secret. People who are young, I'm not sure how to answer that question. I've seen everything. Yeah. Like my friend who is trying to conceive, she's 45. She's trying really hard and it's not happening. It hasn't been happening all those years. So it's a big secret. A few people know, but other people, I think people women talk. In Armenia, you are friendly with your neighbors, with your friends. It's very community based. So people tend to gossip, share, vent. I think amongst women, at least they share and talk. I don't think.
Yes, I see.
You know what I mean? So that culture is there. And I think it's somewhat helpful. But I'm not sure, like growing up, I don't remember hearing stories or as an adult even.
Yes.
Maybe I wasn't interested in that topic or...
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's interesting because the other thing now that I'm thinking about having a second, it's interesting how a few of my friends said, having a second is, I don't know if it's true biomedical, but that often a miscarriage can happen. And then my friends started sharing their stories and I was kind of amazed that, wow, I had known them through some of those experiences and yet they had kept that private to themselves. And I think that's another thing that's kind of very much, I think it is changing, but very much still not talked about and seen as a taboo subject.
Yes.
And it's so sad considering that, I mean, everyone's experience is different. And so I respect if people don't want to share that publicly, that's entirely their prerogative. But I also feel like it's the one time you want to, I guess, be able to support your family and friends and to carry that to carry that yourself is a challenge. So I'm hoping that becomes something that people talk more about and share as part of that, the fertility side and also miscarriages and other challenges.
Yeah, you know what? Now I remember growing up hearing my grandmother and my aunts talk about miscarriages. I do remember they didn't directly speak to me, but I was part of grown-up conversations, always amongst, women. My grandmother had 5 children. She had several abortions at that time, in the old days. And she would speak about those experiences and miscarriages. She would say, before your uncle was born, I lost 2 children. And my aunt, I know she has lost a child. Now that you mention it, yes, I think people do speak in my culture, at least amongst family and close friends. It's a shared experience. And of course, that's very comforting and validating, right? Because almost every woman goes through some kind of hardship, conceiving, pregnancy, post-pregnancy. I don't think it's always like every woman has some kind of story around this topic.
Definitely. And I feel like, once if it does go well and, you have a child, that you're so busy in that first year or 2 years that you almost don't have time to kind of process or share to some extent that experience. And the kind of the idea of why I was thinking partly as well of getting your thoughts and your experience was I was listening to a podcast with Peter Levine, who does a specialist in trauma. And he was telling a story about how he'd worked with a family that had quite a traumatic birth. And listening to it, I just got this sudden, deep, emotional sadness came out and I just burst into tears and kind of I had a bit of a challenging birth and it was so unexpected. I kind of assumed for me that I'd read all the books and I'd been healthy and fit and I was doing pregnancy yoga and, I just assumed that I was, fit and healthy. Why would the birth not just be, an easy process? And I don't like needles. So I was said, I'm not going to have any of the drugs. I don't want that. I'm very clear on what I want and don't want. And then the birth didn't go at all to plan. And, ended up having to have a medication, I've forgotten what the name of the medication you have.
Epidural?
Yes, epidural. And at that point, I wasn't scared of a needle. I didn't mind whatever. My fear of a needle was completely gone. I was in so much pain. I was like, you can cut my arm off right now to get the baby out. But I ended up having to have, cut open and the baby sucked out with the suction things. And it was really traumatic and not at all had I experienced that, had prepared for that. And so, suddenly you've got a baby and you're dealing with all those challenges that I think I didn't really process that trauma around that till really listening to that podcast and went, wow, that's amazing that I have all those feelings and that emotion. And I feel like that's another area where people probably don't really talk much about, the actual birth process and whether that's is kind of, is the baby healthy, yes or no? And that tends to be the focus. I don't know.
Yes. It's, of course, it's traumatic for the mother. What you described, it's traumatic for you and for your baby, right? The suction thing, the whole epidural, the complications that arise, the way the medical staff handles things coldly, factory-like fashion in a lot of cases. I've heard horror stories about women's birth and labor experiences that have been completely traumatic. And I think you're right. You can't take time and say, you know what, I just encountered trauma. I need to process this. No, you got to get up and feed that baby. You got to get up and you stop your bleeding. You got to get up and be a woman, be a mom, take care of a household, responsibilities and baby care. And God knows what else women endure in our society. God forbid they're a single mom. They have no help. It's completely, you have to get up and forget your pain, forget your trauma, and move on with your life. And so it stays with you. This is why maybe we need to raise awareness and educate women. First and foremost, and support needs to be available postpartum, right? Doulas, or I don't know. There are services and people who offer help, but I think many people don't even know about those services, or they don't feel like they need them. They don't deserve them. They don't have the finances. It's again complicated, but such a vital thing, right? Right from the beginning of motherhood, they need that support.
Yes, it's interesting even because I looked at having a doula and my obstetrician said, well, I don't think that's a good idea because the midwives should be in control in the hospital room. And now I look back and was like, I ended up kind of thinking I wasn't pregnant, giving labor, and then ended up going to the hospital 8 centimeters dilated. And I was in so much pain. And I'm sure if I had a doula, they would have said, listen, I think you need to go to the hospital earlier. I'm kind of going, this is really painful, but no, not, And it's interesting. And I imagine America, well, it's such a vast country, but in, Australia, I guess everyone is so busy and living their individual lives that you don't, for me, it was kind of my husband and I were in our apartment. It's not like I had my mums or my aunties or people who could say, oh yeah, that would be a good time now to go to the hospital, or kind of, it's a challenge, I guess, that whole early period, our expectations, the isolation we feel, and, you're so exhausted after giving birth, and then you've got to get on and look after the baby. Did you find what was your kind of experience in those first couple of weeks? Was it kind of how you expected it to be, or?
No. To tell you the truth, looking back I've been a mom for 11 years, and the first few months were the worst experience of motherhood, and it was just horrible experience. It was not, I don't know if I had expectations, to tell you the truth. I didn't have any expectations, maybe some, but not like very, maybe I didn't know what to expect, let's say, but I felt lonely, isolated, helpless, hopeless, tired, fatigued, overwhelmed, dealing with my triggers and lows. And is this what there is to motherhood? Did I do the right thing? Is there a light at the end of this tunnel? I mean, I hate being in this tunnel. I remember breastfeeding was difficult. Recovering for C-section for a couple of months was difficult. I was struggling every single day, couldn't shower, couldn't sleep, didn't have help. I was by myself in a foreign country, no help, no support, no neighbors, no friends, no relatives. My husband was working at the time. He had a very demanding job at that time, and he was present as much as he could, but obviously not as much as we would have liked. So I was starving most days. I remember I didn't know what to eat because I was breastfeeding, and they tell you don't eat broccoli, don't eat this, don't eat dairy. And so I was
that's right. Oh, that information. It's overwhelming at the time as well, isn't it?
And so I was not eating very well, and whatever I was eating wasn't enough. Baby was nursing. Nursing was going very hard. I had mastitis twice. I ended up in ER. I joined
Anna,
a lactation group.
I want to cry for you. That's terrible.
It was very hard. I couldn't walk. I refused to take the pain medication after the C-section. It was just a miserable experience. And of course, I loved my child. I didn't have postpartum depression. I have to be honest about that. I was joyful that I had a baby, but let me tell you, boy, that baby, there was one day she cried for 9 hours straight, and I just put her in her carrier and I looked at her. I'm like, wow, do I rip my hair or do something to this kid? Like, I can't take this anymore.
Yes.
And so I went to my pediatrician. I said, my child was crying 9 hours straight. Please help me. What's going on? And they said, well, she's trying to get the breast milk. You're not feeding correctly. There's not enough milk yet and all of that. And so I went to a lactation consultant, got help, and joined a support group in the hospital. It wasn't much support, to tell you the truth. Everybody was suffering on their own, but we were together, like in the same room.
Yes.
It was, it was no emotional support. Like, you need so much support in the beginning. And so this is how my business began, because when I felt that kind of feelings, loneliness, isolation, and all that, I questioned motherhood and everything. And I lived in a big building, and I'm always like a positive, proactive person, as you know. I said, there's got to be a better way, man. I'm not the only one suffering. And I saw out of the window, there are other moms who are walking alone. They have their baby carriers and strollers. I said, that's it. I'm creating a mommy group. I can't suffer alone. This is not good. I created a flyer that said, join my mommy group, which I didn't have, of course. I put my phone number and posted it in the laundry room of my building, a big high-rise building. Women started calling me to join my mommy group. And so I created a mommy group, a very multicultural, international group of women. And our babies were around the same age. And I invited them to my house, to my apartment, cooked for them. We ate together. We just talked. We vented. Our babies grew up together, and we're still friends to this day.
That's awesome. That's wonderful, Anna.
And so we started taking walks together. And so it changed a little bit for me, but I was proactive. I did something. I couldn't take it anymore. My suffering,
Yes. And how do you think that group helped you process, I guess, that trauma of those first couple of months by having that support? Or did you ever kind of revisit it later and say, I need to process that and work on that? Or
both. I would say both. You also, I have to mention this as well. I think it was pre-Facebook era. At least I wasn't on Facebook. If Facebook was around, Facebook, I don't know. It was 2008 when my daughter was born. Before she was born, when I was pregnant, at that time, if you remember, they were online forums that they were popular.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So somehow I joined an online forum of birth club, so-called, and all the women from around the world in that birth club were pregnant, and we were due in April. So I would get online and talk and share. I wouldn't share much because I was a first-time pregnant woman, and a lot of people had more experience. So the conversations were from what to buy for your newborn, what kind of stroller to get, to breastfeeding, and everything in between. So that was a online support, and I learned and felt encouraged and hopeful, and it was very useful and helpful. And to this day, I'm friends with a couple of those women. And throughout our pregnancy and after delivery, we were still very active in that forum. And then they migrated to Facebook, and then I didn't have Facebook, so I never continued with them. But the ones I made friends with, they visited me. We sent each other gifts. Our children know one another. I made real good friends from that online community. So that was a supportive thing at the time as well.
And I guess looking back, what would you do differently, I think, around that, the pregnancy, well, I guess that, getting fertility process, the contraception, pregnancy and birth, and those couple of early months?
This is what I would do. I would ask for help for sure. I would make sure I have some kind of a plan to have some kind of help available, either hire or solicit from neighbors. I don't know. Just get help, some kind of female help. I would also prepare foods ahead of time, or again, get help. Like these days, people do, when you get pregnant, you get delivery, your friends bring food. Since I didn't have anybody, no one was cooking for me, I was starving, but I would have done something about that. Also, I would have eaten damn everything instead of listening to those sources, because sometimes you get information and you listen blindly and follow, and it's not helpful. I should have eaten everything and never starved myself, because what can it do to my baby? I think, I'm not sure if there's research on that, if that's true. And I exclusively breastfed my child for 2 years.
Yes.
And
because definitely when I talked to my mum, because I had all the library books and I had watched some things on YouTube, and this was kind of before the birth, and then afterwards I would kind of go online if my daughter had reflux, but we didn't know what was wrong initially. So I definitely remember crying those 8-9 hours and just going, what is going on? It's just the breastfeeding's not working, and it was really challenging. And one of the interesting my mum said to me was, in a way, today there's so much information. When she gave birth to me in the 70s, there wasn't so much information, and to some extent she said that meant everyone just kind of got on with it. In a way, it was good and it was bad in that way. She said to some extent she felt she was less stressed because she wasn't on the internet on at night trying to solve something, or so it's interesting. And I definitely know for me, I kind of had to narrow my sources. I kind of went, okay, I'm not looking on the internet for advice. I'm going to talk to my pediatrician. And then I ended up getting a maternity nurse to help me because my daughter basically wouldn't sleep more than an hour or 2 hours straight in the beginning, to help me through the night because I was just really struggling. And that helped me to go, okay, that's my source. And I had a book that what is it?
Yes, what to expect when you're...
Yeah, well, I read that What to Expect in the First Year. So that was my kind of, I guess, book where I went and looked for technical details. But I definitely found I had to kind of stop looking on the internet for information because there was just too many conflicting advice. And as you say, some of the stuff you just read it, it's a one-liner, don't have, they said don't have vegetables because that could cause a bit more gas. And, that's just a huge part of my diet. Suddenly you're like, oh, what part of it's? So, yeah, I think that's, if I look back at what I wish I'd known, it was kind of find your information sources and be selective in where you get your information source, because I think there's so many people who aren't experts but are giving information that really impacts the mother and child.
I know, exactly. I think not knowing is a bliss, honestly. Like I didn't research, I didn't watch videos of how C-section is done. I went in blindly because if I knew what was happening, the surgical process, oh my gosh, I probably would have had a heart attack. I'm very scared of medical procedures. So I don't even know what a C-section is, and it's okay. And it's okay. And sometimes when you don't know, you recover even faster. Like you don't know of the side effects. You don't preoccupy yourself. You don't worry.
Yes.
I think about medical things, certain things I want to know, certain things like I'd rather not. But in terms of processing the birth and everything, that online group was good. I forgot to mention because everybody had to share their birth story. We had to
interesting. Yes.
And so I learned that that's a thing among women in the culture. You have to write your birth story, and where everybody shared their birth story. So you got to see and read everybody else's experience, and every experience was quite different.
Interesting, yes. That sounds a wonderful thing to do, even if you weren't in a group or maybe, with someone, to be able to write that down for yourself, isn't it? To have that at the time to share that, or maybe later when you kind of you have time to process it.
I was journaling too myself. I always been a journaler. Like I always kept a diary, and actively I was journaling at that time. I was talking to this group of women. I think everything is helpful. What you need to share. The more you share, the more you connect, especially with women. I think I can't emphasize that enough, the power of women and mothers, especially those who have more experience than you. It's very comforting. And I didn't have that, right? I didn't have my mom. I didn't have my grandmothers.
Yes.
So I was missing that. Literally in my body, I felt it, that, wow, this is so instinctive and I don't have this. Yeah.
It's so true. And I guess that touches on one of the things I was also curious to hear about from you. I was kind of surprised. My husband and I were kind of a good partnership, when the pregnancy was great. And those early weeks and first months, with my daughter, reflux and crying and the stress and the lack of sleep, we ended up arguing and getting stressed out with each other. And it was surprising to me. I found it more challenging because my husband, we had no idea. He was scheduled to only take 3 days off. And the first, after the 3 days of birth, I'm like crying, "You are not going back to work. Please call your boss and ask for some more days off." And his boss she was a woman, and she was wonderful. She said, "Yes, take the full week." But it's interesting. I found then the challenge, with my mum, and it's pretty common now, I guess mums are working, everyone's working, that people weren't as available, I guess, to come and help. And it was actually my aunt who was amazing, who kind of stepped in, was able to be there, sometimes just to be with me during the day, because, it's kind of scary to be alone by myself. But yeah, I definitely was surprised that for my partnership with my husband, I know this would be different for each, it wasn't as easy, I guess, because he was at work all day and he would come and we were kind of out of sync. So he would say, "Well, how about we try this?" And I'm like, no, I've been tried that already, and this works better. Hold her up and do this. And that caused a lot of tension. And I kind of went, wow, it's almost like having women around me they kind of got it a bit better. And that was a surprise to me. I didn't expect that.
I didn't have that experience with my husband. I think just the opposite. I think the birth of our child brought us a lot more closer. And he trusted me from the beginning in terms of child rearing and parenting and bathing, feeding, that kind of stuff. And since I was breastfeeding solely, so he was doing other things. He would pick up the baby and spend time and that kind of stuff. He was very engaged, not critical, very supportive. Now that you're mentioning this, I'm trying to roll the tape in my mind. And
that sounds wonderful to have that support.
That
sounds amazing.
Yeah, I sort of feel like he surprised me once when it was Ella's 6 month, right? He bought a cake and he said, let's celebrate the half birthday. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yes.
Like I haven't showered in days, now we have to take pictures and all that. So, but we did, I think, because it was also a desire, we wanted to have a child, and now we do. Also, we were conscious and ready. Dad made a difference. And he respected, I think, me in terms of he gave me freedom and he trusted that I'm going to be good at this, which of course I have no idea what I was doing, but I guess maybe he thought I could be better than him. I don't know. But
that's interesting. That's wonderful. Yeah. To give you the space to kind of try and maybe sometimes fail, but also to succeed. And I feel like that goes to that sense of one of the things, I guess for many women who might have worked, who have had jobs, who are kind of secure in their life. I just assumed, funnily enough, that people who, they talk about, I didn't have time for a shower. I just thought, oh, that's because they're badly organized. When I've had a baby, I'll be organized and I'm going to have my shower and I'm going to be all organized, and it was so interesting to go, right, that's what people are saying. It's really, really hectic. But trying to get the confidence in yourself as a mother, like that was really interesting because in my other, I'd been a lawyer and I'd traveled around the world and lived in all these different countries. And so I felt successful in those areas. And suddenly I'm doing something, I was in my 37. So feeling like, okay, I should have this sorted, going, wow, I'm struggling to get this breastfeeding work and I normally get things work. So what's wrong with me? Why can I do this? Maybe I can't do this. And all that internal talk that's going on at 2 a.m. in the morning or 5 a.m. and it's I think that's really challenging as well in as mothers are older and have done different things in their life. It's a different, you're coming out of a different ball game in a way.
Yes, I completely agree. Because you're used to, if you're a type A personality especially, you're used to getting projects done and completed. And you are a doer, get go type of person. And oh my gosh, you can't even apply any of those skills to your baby. Like nothing gets done. Everything you plan just falls apart. And I think I learned that lesson quickly on and embraced that. I was enjoying motherhood. I think I made my goal to enjoy it because I wanted it so much and now I had it. I think that plays a role. Like I remember bathing my child in the sink and enjoying every moment. And there are videos of me in the early days and I could see I was happy. And my name in that forum actually was Happy Mama, my nickname in that online group. So I guess, yes, happiness was part of it. You somehow forget those early days. Now I look at my parenting now and I'm like, I don't think I'm so happy right now. My kid gives me attitude.
Yes, it's interesting. Maybe it's always the way you look back and it's like you'll look back now and go, oh, that was such a wonderful time. Because I think what was interesting for me, because I was really struggling in that first year, I almost felt guilty talking to friends. So friends who had children, they kind of got it when I was like, oh my gosh, I'm finding this so challenging. But the friends who hadn't had children yet, particularly also friends who were trying and weren't successful conceiving, I was really conscious of trying to show that I was grateful. And so that was a challenge, or that I felt guilty if I shared it with kind of friends who hadn't had children. They're like, are you loving it? Is it amazing? And I kind of wanted to say, yes, it is amazing, but it's also really challenging. It's interesting, but the people that had kind of already been through the process kind of got it and was like, okay, when did you have your last shower? When did you, really kind of got into the nitty gritty and were really helpful, and they would be the ones that would come and say, hey, I'm going to do a load of washing for you now, and you'd be like, okay, thanks. I'm going to make the cup of tea, not the friends that would arrive and expect to be entertained, and you're like, oh, I've got a baby and I can't even get out of my seat yet kind of thing. So That's interesting. The different experiences, I guess, of what you feel like you can portray to the world, isn't it?
Yes, I agree.
Mm. And I guess then that kind of early, as she transitioned out of a baby into a toddler, what was that like for you?
Best years of my life.
Wow,
Toddlerhood.
beautiful.
I absolutely adore toddlers. I am good with children, with younger kids especially. I think I'm good in general with children. You can say that about me if you knew me. I worked with children also for 18 years in different education settings. I worked with children with autism, severe autistic children, preschool age, to gifted children in a gifted in a sense that they skip grades type of gifted. I work with juvenile delinquents. I worked with lots of children. So I do have a lot of, I worked in camps. Like, I have a lot of experience. I did have, and I still do, working with children. And toddler years, oh my gosh, were the best. When I was really enjoying getting to know this little being who is this precious thing that discovers the world. And I was discovering it with her, the curiosity, the wonder, the presence that they have. I did enjoy every freaking moment. I can tell you that.
That's
I
wonderful.
enjoyed teaching her about the world and looking at things, asking her questions. I do have some videos. Maybe I'll post a link to a couple of those videos I have the early on, how I was attuning to her. You can see
beautiful.
It was very beautiful. I am not, right now it's very challenging, like the 11th year, 10 to 11. Oh my gosh. I cannot say the same thing about this parenting in this phase, but the toddler years are my absolute favorite. Even the tantrums and everything in between. I had more patience and more curiosity, and because she was walking and talking, I don't know, it's just so wondrous, those years.
Yes, I know what you mean. My daughter is 3 at the moment, and they say the funniest, cutest things that you just can't. It's amazing what goes on their brain, and it is. I mean, I definitely find it challenging at times. We did our call together a few weeks ago about the challenges that I face, and I guess what I can see as you tell me your story was that you've got one of the great traits you have is that when you were in a challenging situation, you kind of were proactive and you went, okay, what do I need to do to make this better? And putting up that advertisement in your the notice in your apartment. And actually, funny enough, one of the ladies in my apartment block did that. And I was late after my daughter was a bit older, and I thought, wow, that's just such a great thing. I would never think of doing that. I would never have organized a group of mums. And the mothers group that I went to, I didn't really connect so much. I felt like it reminded me being back at kind of my all-girls high school, where there was the queen bee, mum who knew it all, and everyone wanted to talk to her and sit next to her. There was one or two cool mums, and they would kind of tell everyone what they were doing, and everyone else felt a bit disheveled and weren't achieving their high standards. So I didn't really connect with that group, and now looking back, I would say, whoa, I think what I should have done is probably be more proactive about finding my tribe, my mums that suited me, and maybe mums who had been working, just the group that I had. That was just by chance. The hospital allocates you to a group. But I can see how when you're faced with adversity, your proactive stance kind of helps so that you avoid, I guess, going into that depression or anxiety. You're probably at risk at that point from the circumstances where you are isolated and not with your community, but you then made that your community, and having the support of your husband is wonderful. So I can see how that each person kind of needs to work out for themselves. Okay, what can I help myself to make this situation a bit better? Do I need to go and talk to a therapist? Do I need to find a counselor? Do I need to connect with some old friends? I'd imagine that process is so unique for each person.
Oh, absolutely. I think, you're absolutely right about that. Now that I'm thinking about it myself, I don't like being stuck in victimhood. And I think it comes probably from, my life, obviously.
Yes.
When my brother and I were caught in the earthquake, the two of us, we were home when the earthquake happened. And so we had to help one another. And I was the older sister to get out and do everything by ourselves. So I guess I'm used to being alone and taking care of my needs and my survival. And
yes.
That could be good or bad, because relying on other people is really good too. But I think that can be very harmful and I struggle with this as well. You always give, and overdo and kill yourself. Meanwhile, you could have hired help, or you could have done something.
Ask for help. Yes.
That can go to that extreme as well. But I hate being stuck in victimhood. And when I see people stuck like that, my clients, I want to help them and rescue them and encourage them to get out of that, because you have a choice. You can change your life, not just by saying those words, because if someone is struggling, you can't just say motivational things like that. You need to offer support first, and then they will find their strength. And that's how I do my work with parents. And they always say, you're so encouraging and uplifting, because I believe, I survived a severe earthquake. Life is wonderful. We have this one precious life. We gotta strive and fight and, suck the juice out of this life. You can't be stuck in your victimhood. And of course, there are situations when a person has hormonal issues, biological issues. I'm not blaming people for that.
Totally.
Yep. It's not about that. You always have a choice. I believe that we can make our lives better. Don't even rely on other people to come and rescue you. Do something for yourself first, be proactive. Like the other day in my, this is a very minor, silly example, of course, but the Authentic Parenting office is in this 4-story big office building. I am on the first level, and on the second level is the women's bathroom. So one day I go to the bathroom and there is no soap, and there is a sticky note on the soap dispenser. It says, "Please provide hand soap. Thank you." Like there is no, it was a message. And that sticky note was taped carefully with the tape. And I went in and I see there's no soap. I said, okay, well, there's no soap. And there is a convenience store next to my office. It's called Rite Aid. It's a pharmacy. It's called a pharmacy in America, but I don't know what's in Australia. They sell everything from food to drugs to convenience items. So I said, you know what? Let me go get some soap. I'm not going to wait. Who am I waiting for to replace the soap here? And who am I complaining to? The landlord? When are they going to come and see the message? So I went. I went to the store. I spent $2. I bought a nice smelling, beautiful soap, and I put it there. And I took the sticky note and threw it in the garbage. And it's there, the soap. I was in my office today, and I enjoyed washing my hands and my clients and everybody else. And that's how I feel about life. Okay, you put a note, you complain. The same was true about my building when there was. I feel like if I can do something, I should do something. If I complain, who's going to hear my complaints? That's a minor thing, of course, but the same philosophy, I guess, applies to other things in life,
Yes. And I just want kind of tapping on that. It's interesting because I think Australia and America are quite similar. On the one hand, we definitely as cultures, it's big about doing it yourself, right? And you can, you're responsible for yourself. And I guess when I was thinking through the birth and the pregnancy process and afterwards, I wasn't used to asking for help in a way. Like I was, that A-type personality or maybe the B type. I don't know if I categorize as A, but B or whatever it is. But, I wasn't used to going, hey, I'm struggling here. I thought I could fix it myself. So it's funny, isn't it? That on the one hand, it's like you need to be able to ask for help, but because that's okay at that time because you do need help. But it's also having the courage and to kind of, when you're used to not asking for help and doing it yourself and making it happen yourself, to take that first step and to contact a counselor or call a friend to ask them to help with meals. It's really interesting, isn't it? What I found was that it was easier for me to spend money to get help, but much harder for me to ask family and friends to ask for their help. Like, I didn't have anyone bring around meals or I just didn't feel comfortable asking them because I knew how busy their lives were. But in hindsight, I kind of wish I'd said to, maybe my dad or, my mom, hey, can you bring me a lasagna or can you bring me something? Like, it's interesting.
And they will feel good about bringing the lasagna. I think this is my philosophy. There is no harm in asking. If the person cannot, they should decline and say, you know what, it's not convenient, or they will not respond, but at least ask. I think it all comes down to knowing yourself. If you know that you can take care of this on your own, do it. But if you know that you can't, then reach out and ask. There's no shame or harm in asking. What's going to happen? What's the worst thing that can happen? You'll get rejected. So what? At least you tried. I think, you know what I mean?
And that's that challenge. Yeah, like I guess at that point, you're like, I can do this, but I'm struggling and I kind of need help, but I don't want to ask for help because I can do this. And it's like you go in that circle.
Because you don't want to appear vulnerable or weak.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But also, I think we undermine others if we don't ask for their help, who will be happily contributing and helping us, because that makes them feel so much happier too when they contribute. I think when you tell someone, hey, like a specific request, can you bring lasagna? My heart desires lasagna. They will say, you know what? Yes. Like I would do such thing for someone if I knew exactly what they needed. I think the trouble is when you don't know when they need help.
Yes.
You sort of guess that they need help, but they're not asking. And you're like so uncomfortable. You're like, I don't know. Shall I do this? What shall I bring? Maybe they will not accept it. Oh my gosh, why should? And then you question so many things. But if people were more straightforward and open, I think things will be a lot easier.
I definitely know for me, I've started reaching out, particularly for my friends who've had their kind of birth, their first child, to say, kind of texting them kind of also those first couple of days, like, how are you doing? Are you feeling okay? Like a lot more recognizing, giving them space to share the challenges as well as the positive, because I think that knowing, hey, it can be really challenging, or other people can be like, this is a piece of cake. I don't know what everyone was worrying about. I'm fine. My baby's sleeping 8 hours a day. And that's what I found as well. There was such a diverse experience that you kind of like, you got to be like on the lookout or kind of say, I think as particularly having had a child, you kind of go, okay, you kind of pick up the cues from your friends, which ones are maybe challenging it, having a bit more of a challenge than not, that's interesting. So, it's so, thank you, Anna, for sharing so much of your personal story. I know that it's not easy. People don't often talk about this stuff, I guess, in a public forum. And, my hope, I guess, with this conversation was that if, a new mum is listening who, has had similar experiences, or, a mum who's already had one or several children and goes, oh my gosh, yes, I've never had a chance to talk to someone about this, or, my second child was a lot harder than my first. There's just so many stories to encourage people to share that with other friends and family, or on your Facebook forum, or, to open up about it, that you don't have to kind of carry it yourself.
Yes, we need to. That's a fundamental, basic human need we have. And we don't have the village, we don't have the community, but we can build our own little community, little tribe, even if it's one person, even if it's an online forum, even if it's a hospital group, or even if you have to ask your mother-in-law who you completely don't like my neighbor in this new community just gave birth, and I can see she's struggling. Honestly, she's struggling. She has a newborn and a 2.5-year-old. And every single day, and I'm getting tired of it. But I keep saying to her, hey, if you need my help, today I'm working from home. Please call me. Let's have tea together. Let's have tea together. I made this food. Would you like some of this particular food? Do you want to go for a walk? Every day I make myself available in different ways. She went on a walk with me once. I said, I'll take care of your toddler. I adore toddlers. I'll spend time with her. and I guess she feels embarrassed. She doesn't want to impose.
Yes. It's that. I think it's such a tragedy of our cultures is that it is feeling it. Yeah, exactly. I don't want to impose. And that's so sad, isn't it? That we isolate ourselves. We kind of voluntarily cut ourselves off with a silly assumption that we will be a burden. And it's sad, I think. That breaks my heart to hear that because, you can see the struggling, but not being able to help. That's a challenge.
And I am available. I offer myself literally every day. I bump into her, I text her or I call her.
Wow.
And I feel as if I'm imposing on her. Now she might think, what's my goal in here, But I do remember those days that even just seeing another human being and speaking about nonsense even is so vital to feel like you're alive. And
so true. I remember crying to my husband saying, why would anyone ever have a second? I don't know why. This is so challenging. I don't want to do it, And now, funny enough, at the beginning of the, thinking about trying for a second, I'm like, wow, isn't this interesting? Okay, what am I going to do differently? Well, there's a long list of what I'm going to do differently. One of the things is not read all those silly books about. We in Australia, there's a book called Tizzy Hall. Save Our Sleep, and it's so prescriptive and so controlled. I think it's by that half an hour what you have to do. I was like, oh, put it away. Yes, you might get a baby that fits that routine, but there's a high chance you won't, and so you're just going to stress yourself out if he doesn't fit that routine, or there's just so many things that I'll be like, okay, if I'm fortunate enough to get pregnant, to say, yeah, okay, I learned the hard way. I won't be trying that again.
You already have experience, luckily, and maybe, you will have courage to ask for help and put together a plan, of support system, at least in the beginning months for yourself.
Definitely.
I think that's key. Instead of planning a perfect birth with candle lights and a Spotify playlist or things like that, I think that's so... that's not that important. I think what comes after is way more important and hard. We should really plan that.
Definitely. No, I think that's great advice. Absolutely great advice. It's kind of who we're going to have support from and what I guess our plan Bs as well when things don't.
Yes.
That's the one thing. Anything you plan to some extent, also you have to have that flexibility because children get sick, all those things that you need support suddenly where you didn't ever think that you would need that type of support. So, that's, well, thank you, Anna. You've been so generous with your time and wisdom and I do appreciate it so much.
You don't have any other questions?
No, that's been wonderful. I feel like I've taken lots of your time, and it's
don't feel like that. Yeah, I don't feel like that. If you have any other questions, I welcome them. If you don't,
thank you.
I'll think about those questions that you asked me again, and remember our conversation. And I wish you good luck in conceiving the second. Don't have stress over it. I think that's the main thing. Have the idea and let it go, and relinquish all control. And,
yes,
and don't cling to your desire.
Yes, yes. I will plan. It's kind of funny, So I'm used to being organized and control. So it's like, okay, I'm going to plan not to try and have control. Okay, that's my plan.
Yes. You know what you should do? I think it's like planting a seed, right? You have no control how that seed will turn out or whether it will turn into a seedling or will grow or whatever. All you can do is just plant and hope and pray and wait. and patience, right?
Yes.
And maybe symbolically, you can do something like that in your garden. You can
That's
go
beautiful. I like that. I think that's a great idea.
You can go and
Yes.
put some seeds in the ground and wait. And with that wait, I'm not saying tie your hopes of conceiving to that plant. What if it doesn't grow? Or
No, I know what you mean. It's like, yes,
right?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Symbolically, yeah.
Yes, my husband's father has a great saying, which is man plans, God decides. I kind of change it with, it's woman plans, the universe decides. So that's how we don't control everything around us.
No.
And it's just, it's an amazing journey. Wow, what an amazing journey! Every part of the process.
It is. It expands you. It makes you grow. I think women are powerful. Women are creators. That's a big lessons that I've learned by giving birth and experiencing motherhood and connecting to other women and mothers of different generations. I just learned, wow, how powerful women are, that you can bring forth this human life and do everything else, right? So much. And I think I said this on another podcast I was a guest on. I feel like when a woman gives birth, something opens up in her, like something potent and creative, some doorway to this enormous magical energy. And I think if women only believed in that they have power, creativity, and life source, and this powerful, potent energy, if you just unleash that and believe in that, oh my gosh, I think it's magical. But I think many of us suppress it. We play it small. We don't believe it. But we are magical creators. Not to downplay men, I'm not saying anything about them, but women are truly powerful, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And almost the way that the media presents it as this kind of glowing, easy thing. And then in reality, so many people struggle and have challenges. Actually, there's the power, is that all these women and, whether it's same sex or, heterosexual, homosexual, whatever your, or mix or whatever your story is and your journey is, that that's the power is going through those challenges and that experience and, getting to the other side as best you can, and the best you do it the best you can. And we're all trying to do it the best we can. And that's that power and that beauty that you kind of go, wow, I can't believe I got through that first year. That was really tough and I did it. And I'm willing to risk and be vulnerable and try it again, because for me, even though it was so tough, it's like that power, that wow, I can try, and that's beautiful.
And remembering our legacy of our mothers and grandmothers, women who came before us, we carry their strength in us. Wow. I look at my mother, at my grandmother, who raised 5 children during the World War II with no husband, with no money, no support, nothing. And she survived and thrived. And later in her life, we all have those stories. We carry that. It's in our DNA.
Beautiful.
And so let's remember that and go into the world, believe in ourselves, create amazing things, life, art, whatever else you can create. Maybe it's a simple meal that you create that day. I think women need to believe in that and unleash their power. And, we can make change happen. What's that saying that says when women wake up, mountains move? When women get together, right? There is a saying, I forgot how it goes, but I will put that in the show notes. Yes.
Wonderful.
So thank you so much, my dear Amber.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity just to have this chat. It's been truly, truly amazing. I feel so grateful. Thank you, Anna.
I honor your time and your interest, and I hope it's interesting for other people as well.
Me too.